Hey guys, Brother John checking in for our Wednesday in the Word. Hope things are going well for you out there. And so it looks like we may be starting to transition a little bit in church life. I know there's some announcements about reopening of the state and reopening of the county and some things. And so be on the lookout for just some decisions made in the future about the church, how we're going to approach that. We need to see, we're obviously waiting on recommendations from our local governments to see how we need to respond. But as a staff, we're already trying to anticipate some things and talk about some plans. So that'll be coming up soon. So be sure you stay in tune to Facebook and watch your email and those things so we'll know what we need to do. But until that time comes that we're back together, we're going to continue on Wednesdays to go through Romans 8. I've got my hands in the screen. Ooh. That just doesn't look right, does it? I'll keep them down here. You ever know? Have y'all noticed that people on camera? That one of the things that has to be hard to learn is to not speak with your hands. You see the news people; they don't move their hands. They're just sort of talking heads. We even call them that. So I won't be doing any more of this. All right, that's the last time I do that. We're going through Romans 8, and I want to just remind us of what we've seen. We're in Romans 8, 18 through 25 today, but this is our, let me see, this is our fifth week going through Romans 8. So let me remind you of what we've seen. The first thing we did was we looked at Romans 8, 1 through 4, and we saw the point of that lesson a month ago, I guess, was that since we've been freed from sin and indwelt by the Spirit, we can walk according to the Spirit and not the flesh. So we've been made new. We can now live a life that honors the Lord. And then we looked at Romans 8, 5 through 8. And in that, we saw the point of the lesson was that if our minds are set on the things of the Spirit, then we're able to please God. And so we can live lives that please Him. Really, verses 1 through 8 are really one paragraph. We just divided it into two. Then we looked at Romans 8, 9 through 11, where we saw that though our bodies are now dead, they will be made alive if the Spirit lives in us. And that's important for the verses we're going to look at today. And then last week we were in Romans 8, 12 through 17, where we saw that since we are His children, then we must actively seek personal holiness. And so Paul's really talking about so many things, but most of it is the idea that we're indwelt by the Spirit and there's renewal in that. And he talks about all three aspects of our salvation. The I have been saved, I am being saved, and I will be saved. And in our verses today, he talks about those things in relation to creation, in relation to the world. And the fact that it will also be redeemed and renewed and made right. So let me read it to you. Romans chapter 8, 18 through 25. Paul said, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us. For the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that creation itself also will be set free from its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation groans and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. And not only this, but also we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves." Hold on, I lost my spot. "Groan within ourselves, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our body." See, that's completed salvation. For in hope we have been saved. So that's I have been saved. Completed salvation is I will be saved. So all these things are mixed in together. But hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what he already sees? And then verse 25, "For if we hope for what we do not see, with perseverance we wait eagerly for it." So Paul begins to talk about the fact that you and I are redeemed, we're saved, we anticipate our completed salvation, and at the same time the earth does too. The earth is fallen. That's why you have weeds in your yard. That's why you have natural disasters. That's why we have things like the coronavirus and the flu and cancer and those things, because when Adam sinned, we sinned and the world was cursed. And so we still suffer the consequences of that. So let's just walk through these verses today and see what we can see. So go back to verse 18. He says, "For I consider that the suffering of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us." There's suffering in this present time. There are people who are dying right now as we speak because they've contracted this virus. There are people that you and I know who are dealing with cancer and with sickness and with financial problems and marriage issues and physical issues and mental issues and jobs not going well. Maybe they've lost their job in the midst of all this. There's always suffering. That's the world we live in because Christ has not returned yet. He has not set up his kingdom visibly here on earth. The earth has not been redeemed. We're still waiting. We're in that period between when he ascended. Oh, there's my hand again. When he ascended into heaven, and we're waiting on him to come back. And so we're in that time. So Paul just lays that out there. He says, as bad as those are, though, he said, it's nothing compared to the glory that's to come. And then he begins to talk about those sufferings. He says in verse 19, "For the anxious longing of the creation waits eagerly for the revealing of the sons of God." That's completed salvation. That's our glorification, when we're glorified and perfected and receive our glorified bodies to go into the new heaven and the new earth to spend eternity with God. And he says creation itself, he personifies creation here, that creation is waiting on that too, because when we are perfected, the world is as well. Because remember where we spend eternity. It's here on the new heaven and the new earth and the new Jerusalem. What's been cursed because of sin is made perfect in the end times, and we go into eternity there. And so Paul is saying, as much as we anticipate heaven, as much as we look forward to that day, the earth does too, because the earth suffers the consequences of sin. Go back to verse 20. He tells us when this happens. He says, "For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it." And this is talking about the fact that God cursed the earth because of the sin of Adam. If you'll remember, you can just write this down. I'm going to read it to you. Genesis chapter 3, verses 17 and 19, after Adam's sin and the whole conversation with Adam and Eve and the serpent and that whole thing. God says in Genesis 3:17, "Then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it, cursed is the ground because of you." So because of Adam. "In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life, but thorns and thistles it shall grow for you. And you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread, till you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return." And so Paul here is talking about the fact that, yes, you and I are lost and need redemption, but the earth itself, the physical earth, the ground, the moon, the stars, all those things that you see, there's a curse on that because of sin. But ultimately, those things are made right. So go back to what he says at the end of verse 20. You'll notice in most translations, there's a comma right there at the end of verse 20, because the sentence continues into 21, where he says, "In hope that the creation itself also will be set free." So creation will be saved. It will be set free. But from what? "From its slavery to corruption into the freedom of the glory of the children of God." And by using that language, that idea of corruption, that word that he uses there, Paul uses that same word in 1 Corinthians 15 when he talks about our bodies and the fact that our bodies are perishable but will be raised imperishable. Our bodies are corrupted, but they'll be raised incorruptible. 1 Corinthians 15:42 says, "So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown a perishable body, it is raised an imperishable body." And so the earth is perishable, the earth is corrupted, our bodies are perishable, our bodies are corrupted, and then ultimately when salvation is completed, those things are made new. So he says in verse 22, "For we know that the whole creation groans There's a groaning there, and suffers the pains of childbirth together until now. You see those birth pains, you see that happening. The best way to think of it is like natural disasters. The fact that there's a hurricane season or a tornado season, that certain parts of the country suffer from earthquakes, that you have monsoons. Did I already say monsoons? I don't know. That you have these things that happen. The reason, forest fires, just pick any kind of natural disaster. Those are the most visible way to think about it. That the earth groans, that there are birth pains, that there's some agony that's going on because the earth was cursed. But all that will be taken away. All that will be redeemed. All that will be made new when you and I are perfected, when our salvation is completed. The salvation of the earth will be as well. So he starts to put all that together in verse 23. He says, and not only this, but also we ourselves, having the first fruits of the Spirit, even we ourselves groan within ourselves. So the creation is groaning and we're groaning, waiting eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our body, which is our completed salvation. That what you and I think of as I will be saved, that glorified, perfected body that we receive to spend eternity in the new heaven and the new earth. And so it goes back to those three aspects of salvation. I have been saved, I am being saved, I will be saved. When we get to the I will be saved, to that completed salvation, the earth itself is also renewed and made complete. And there's suffering until then, but there's the promise and there's the hope, because that's where he goes next. He talks about the hope in all of this. Look at verse 24. For in hope, so that thing we're looking forward to, we have been saved, right? That's the first part of salvation. We have been saved, and so now we're looking forward to the I will be saved. So for in hope we have been saved, but hope that is seen is not hope. There would be a faith element to it if we could see it. For who hopes for what he already sees? Well, the answer is nobody. You hope for what you can't see. You hope for what you're anticipating. But if we hope for what we do not see with perseverance, so endurance, growing, maturing, we wait eagerly for it. And so Paul begins to make this comparison and sort of shows us that salvation, there's two tracks running towards the same thing. And that is that the plan to redeem humanity also includes redemption of the creation, of which we are certainly the highest. Of God's creation, we're the only thing created in his image. And that's why Jesus came to die for us. Jesus didn't come to die for the mountains. He shed his blood for you and for me. And in all of that, when that salvation is completed and we're glorified, God will also reverse the curse that he brought onto the earth, and things will be made new again. You guys, if you sat under my preaching much or my teaching, and I've mentioned this, I try to mention this whenever I can, you notice the Bible ends the same place it begins. It starts in a garden and it ends in a garden. And everything in between those two gardens is about getting back to the garden. We got kicked out in Genesis 3, and then you have all the stuff from Genesis 4 to Revelation 20 that are getting us back to the garden in Revelation 21 and 22. Really, 22 is where the garden is, but we see new heaven, new earth in 21. And so that's what Paul's getting at here. He's saying that ultimately the earth itself will be made new as well. So what do we see here? What's the point? Well, it's a simple sentence today. Our hope is in completed salvation. I'll say it again. Our hope is in completed salvation. So the moment you repented of your sins and placed your faith in Jesus Christ, that's when you have been saved. You're growing. You and I are maturing in our faith. We're being saved, and our hope, that future that we look forward to, is I will be saved, which is our completed, fulfilled salvation, which is the redemption of our bodies, the perfection of our bodies, which also includes the perfection and redemption of the earth. So three little thoughts, and then we'll be done. Number one, there will always be suffering until creation is redeemed. It's just going to happen. We're going to have sickness. We're going to have natural disasters. You and I are going to suffer. It's just the way of life because of sin. So until Christ returns, that's part of it. Number two, the salvation of humanity and that of creation are all part of the same redemption. There's just the one plan. And it all comes to a head, it all comes to completion at the same time. And then number three, we live with hope, not fear. It's very easy, especially right now, to fall into fear and fall into the trap of the unknown and get worried about it. But ultimately, we hope, and it's not a, oh, I hope so. It's an anticipation of a guarantee. We have that hope to look forward to, of perfection, of completed salvation. And so while we need to be wise in how we live, yet while we need to be wise in, like right now, going out with a face mask on, or avoiding crowds, or whatever it looks like in this moment for what God has allowed to take place in our lives, that doesn't negate the fact that we know that all those things are going to be made right, and we have hope in that. So while we're wise in those circumstances, we don't let it bring us into a constant spirit of fear. It's one of hope, it's one of trust, it's one of good sense. The Lord gave us a brain to do the things that we need to do, to stay safe and stay healthy, so that we're able to take care of our families and be there for them. But at the same time, we're not shaking like a leaf all the time, thinking, oh no, oh no, oh no. It's okay, God's in control here, and so I'm not going to fear. I'm going to do the things that I need to do, but I'm not going to live in constant fear. So just an interesting idea, one that often is easy to lose sight of, the fact that this crazy world and all the disasters and all the things that we see, ultimately, all that will be taken away, all that will be perfected, all that will be redeemed, just like you and I will be if we know Christ. Well, guys, that's Romans 8. What is it? 18 through 25, and so we'll pick up next week in verse 26. We're probably just going to look at 2 verses next week. I think just 26 and 27 is how I have it laid out, so maybe I won't talk as long. Although I've noticed that often shorter passages, I tend to talk longer. I have no idea how long I've been talking now, so I won't know till I hit this little button and see how long it was. But guys, stay healthy, stay safe, and we will see y'all online on Sunday morning.